Before we start, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because tonight's story is about the moment a hospital full of people finally learned who they'd been working beside all along. Olivia Marsh had been an ICU nurse at Harborview Regional Medical Center for barely a month when her coworkers began forming their quiet, dismissive opinions about her. She was too young, some said, barely 26, with an unassuming, almost timid presence during shift briefings that made her seem far less confident than the senior nurses expected from anyone assigned to the intensive care unit. She rarely spoke up in meetings, kept mostly to herself during breaks, and carried an air of quiet reserve that her colleagues mistook for inexperience rather than the deliberate, practiced discipline of someone who had spent years learning exactly when speaking mattered and when it didn't. "She's sweet, but I don't know if she's cut out for ICU," Nurse Patricia Lombard remarked to a colleague one evening, watching Olivia move through her rounds with careful, methodical attention. "Something about her just seems like she's still finding her feet." What Patricia and the rest of the ICU staff had no way of knowing was that Olivia Marsh had spent the 4 years before nursing school serving as a Navy corpsman embedded with a Marine reconnaissance unit, one of the few women to complete an extraordinarily demanding pipeline of training that qualified her to provide frontline trauma care in combat environments most people would never willingly set foot in. She had treated gunshot wounds in the dark, performed field tracheotomies under artillery fire, and carried wounded Marines twice her size across open terrain while bullets kicked up dust inches from her boots. She had left the service quietly, without fanfare, choosing to continue her medical calling in a hospital setting where the chaos, while still real, came without the added weight of enemy fire. She had never mentioned any of it to her new colleagues. It simply hadn't seemed relevant to the quiet, steady work of caring for patients in Harborview's ICU. That quiet reserve was put to the test on a Thursday evening that began, like most evenings at Harborview, with the ordinary rhythm of monitoring vitals, adjusting medications, and checking in with patients recovering from surgery. It ended in chaos no one on staff had trained for, when the emergency room doors burst open just after 7 o'clock, and a full contingent of armed Marines flooded into the department, weapons raised, boots pounding against the tile floor with an intensity that sent patients screaming and staff scrambling for cover behind desks and gurneys. The Marines weren't there to cause harm. They were escorting one of their own, a badly wounded staff sergeant who had been critically injured during a live-fire training exercise gone wrong at a nearby base, and in the chaos and urgency of getting him to the nearest trauma center, the accompanying security detail had stormed the ER with a level of tactical intensity that civilian hospital staff had never experienced firsthand. Dr. Alan Whitfield, the ER's attending physician, froze momentarily at the sight of armed personnel filling his department, uncertain how to process the sudden, jarring collision of military urgency and civilian medical protocol. It was Olivia, pulled from the ICU to assist with the overwhelming influx of trauma cases that evening, who moved first, cutting through the chaos with a calm, practiced authority that seemed to belong to an entirely different version of the quiet nurse her coworkers thought they knew. She approached the wounded staff sergeant's gurney directly, calling out vitals in clipped, precise medical terminology, her hands already working to assess the extent of his injuries even as panicked hospital staff struggled to regain their footing around her. "Clear a trauma bay, now," she shouted, her voice carrying an unmistakable command that silenced the confused chatter around her. "I need 2 units of O-negative and a rapid infuser prepped immediately." The Marines, initially focused entirely on securing the perimeter around their wounded comrade, gradually became aware of the young ICU nurse working with a speed and precision that seemed entirely out of place for a civilian medical facility. One of them, a broad-shouldered gunnery sergeant named Frank Delgado, watched her work with narrowing, increasingly curious eyes, noting the specific, practiced way she packed the wound, the particular terminology she used when calling out to the surgical team now rushing to assist her, the unmistakable rhythm of someone who had done this exact work before, under conditions far more dangerous than a civilian ER. "Where'd you learn to work like that?" Delgado asked, stepping closer as Olivia continued stabilizing the wounded sergeant, her focus never wavering from the patient in front of her. Later, Olivia said sharply, not looking up. "Right now I need everyone who isn't medical staff to clear this bay." Delgado, recognizing the unmistakable authority in her voice, immediately began directing his men to fall back, creating space for the medical team to work without the added chaos of armed personnel crowding the trauma bay. It was a small thing, but it was exactly the kind of instinctive tactical awareness that came from years of working alongside exactly this kind of emergency response, an awareness that seemed entirely too fluent for an ICU nurse who, by every account from her coworkers, had barely found her footing in her new role. Over the following hour, Olivia worked alongside the surgical team to stabilize the wounded staff sergeant, her calm, methodical competence a stark contrast to the fear and uncertainty rippling through the rest of the department in the aftermath of the Marine's dramatic arrival. Dr. Whitfield, watching her work from across the trauma bay, found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about the quiet, unassuming nurse who had transferred into his ICU a month earlier. It was only after the staff sergeant had been stabilized and moved into surgery that Delgado approached Olivia again, this time with a different kind of curiosity in his expression, something closer to recognition than confusion. "You were Navy," he said, not quite a question. "Corpsman, right? I've seen guys work a trauma like that maybe a handful of times in 15 years, and every single one of them wore an anchor." Olivia finally allowed herself a small, tired exhale, some of the tension of the past hour finally easing from her shoulders. "For years with a recon unit," she admitted quietly. "Left the service 2 years ago. Figured I'd keep doing the same work, minus the artillery." The revelation rippled through the gathered hospital staff standing nearby, several of whom had spent the past month quietly underestimating the young nurse now standing before them with blood on her scrubs and a composure that made perfect sense in light of what she'd just revealed. Patricia Lombard, standing near the edge of the trauma bay, stared at Olivia with an expression that mixed disbelief with something close to shame, remembering her own dismissive comments from weeks earlier about whether the young nurse was truly cut out for ICU work. "You served with recon?" Dr. Whitfield asked, his voice carrying genuine astonishment as he processed the full weight of what Olivia had just calmly stated in the middle of a chaotic trauma bay. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it wasn't relevant to doing my job here," Olivia said simply. "I didn't come to Harborview to be treated differently. I came here to be a good nurse. That's still all I want." Gunnery Sergeant Delgado, standing nearby with the rest of his security detail now considerably more relaxed following the successful stabilization of their wounded comrade, extended a hand toward her with unmistakable respect. "Ma'am, on behalf of every Marine in this room, thank you," he said. "You just saved one of ours, and you did it better than half the field medics I've served alongside over the years." Olivia shook his hand, offering the same quiet, understated smile she'd carried through every shift since arriving at Harborview a month earlier. "He's a Marine," she said simply. "That's reason enough." In the days that followed, word of what had happened that Thursday evening spread quickly through Harborview's staff, transforming the quiet, uncertain reputation Olivia had unknowingly carried during her first month on the job into something entirely different. Patricia Lombard sought her out personally to apologize for her earlier assumptions, admitting she'd judged Olivia's quiet demeanor as inexperience rather than recognizing it for what it truly was, the calm, deliberate composure of someone who had already proven herself in circumstances far more demanding than anything Harborview's ICU could throw at her. Olivia never sought recognition for what had happened that night, never leaned on her military service as leverage for special treatment or admiration from her coworkers. She simply returned to her regular rounds in the days that followed, checking vitals, adjusting medications, offering the same quiet, attentive care to every patient under her watch that she always had. But something had shifted permanently among the staff who worked alongside her, a newfound understanding that the quietest, most unassuming person in any room might be carrying far more strength and history than anyone had bothered to notice, until the moment finally demanded it of her. If this story left you inspired, make sure you're subscribed to this channel so you never miss the next one. New stories of hidden strength, quiet heroism, and unexpected respect earned, every single week. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of Olivia's story surprised you most. We'll see you in the next one.